Hi everyone, this is Ben Fitzer, Realtor. Today I want to talk about a very important topic, and that is what should you do before you list your home? What gets you the best bang for your buck on a limited budget? Okay, so very important topic. You want to sell your property. You don't want to have a lot of money. Let's say you're on a limited budget to get it fixed up. So, what can you do to get the most bang for your buck? So let's dive right in. My number one suggestion would be cleaning, okay? And this is gonna be number one by a mile. So when I say cleaning, I mean not just a little clean, all right? We want the place to be just super clean, all right? I want eating off the living room floor clean. I use that expression, but that's what I'm looking for, right? Where something, it's like, it looks so clean, you feel like you could just put your lunch, drop it right on the living room floor and just eat, right? Eat off it. It looks like that clean, okay? Obviously you're not gonna do that, but you get the idea. It just looks like, that kind of clean. So, that's super important. Now let's talk about that for a minute, because that may sound very easy and, no problem, but the reality is, in my experience, it's not that easy. Okay, so number one, who's gonna do it? So you don't wanna just select someone online based on they have the cheapest quote, because I'll tell you people, most of the, at least a lot, if not most, of the cleaners you may come across, they're just not gonna do a good job, or they're not gonna do the kind of job that you want to get, maximum bang for the buck. All right, so what I would recommend is you just get a reference from someone who knows real estate and someone who can recommend some people that will clean it, that, can vouch for these people that it'll be super clean, right? They have an eye for it. It'll just be clean as a whistle, okay? So you gotta find the right people. Now, look, when it comes to this, you don't wanna skimp on the price. Okay, let's say you have a 2,000 square foot home, give or take, depending on what market you're in. It may cost you $500 to $1,000, right? Depending on the size of your house and how dirty it is, to get it clean as a whistle. But you really want to get it clean as a whistle. Okay, now if you have a good eye for cleaning, you're good at cleaning, you want to do it yourself, and you will commit to doing it, then fine. Do it yourself. But in most situations, in my experience, I would recommend people hire professionals, because, they don't have the time or the patience, or they just, they just don't want to do it. And they're just, for whatever reason, they're not gonna, do the same level of work, that a professional would do. It's hard to do, contractor, professional level work at your own house. You've got your own job, you've got things to do, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you all understand what I'm saying. So get the house super clean, don't skimp, get a good reference, so really, really try to deliver the goods there. All right, item number two would be landscaping. Okay, great landscaping, especially the front yard, especially the curb appeal. Okay, when people pull up, you want it to look super nice, okay? And especially very clean and neat. All right, so I don't need like fountains to be put in and that kind of thing. That's not what I'm talking about. If the front of your house kind of looks like a pigsty, or it just looks bad, then, pick up all the debris, any trash, and just clean it up really nicely. And, cut the grass nicely. And then edging. Edging is something that, to me, I'm a big fan of that. I think it looks really good, edging around the hard surfaces. So that's when you kind of, I think you all know what edging is, but around the driveway, around any walkways, that's an opportunity to really, get points, all right, to make something look good by edging around the hard surfaces. So you want your front to look very nice. Now the back is not as important, but again, you want it to look clean and neat. So if you have I don't know, big tree issues in the back or a lot of, stumps or whatever, you want to clear it out as much as you can, but for whatever reason, if you don't have the budget to pick up everything or whatever is going on, maybe let's say you have some bushes that are kind of out of control that you'd like to trim, you don't have the budget for that. Again, just do the grass, cut the grass very neatly. If you have a patio, try to edge around the hard surface of the patio. But any like big, massive bushes situation, if you can address it, do. But if not, it's okay. Just cut the grass, edge it, and kind of keep it at that. All right, that's all that you really need. Just clean and neat. All right, so that's your landscape, number 2. Now let's move on to item number 3. Okay, this may sound a little silly, but people, this is important. Item number 3, try not to have any ridiculous issues in your house. No obvious, ridiculous issues going on. All right, so what do I mean by that? Okay, holes in the wall. Let's say your door doesn't open. You got to fight to open the front door. That's not good. People want to come in, see your house. You don't want to have to, have a problem opening the front door, for example. Let's say the heat doesn't work. It's a freezing, you're trying to sell your house in the winter. There's no heat. That's not great. Maybe you have a toilet that just looks extremely, beat up and bad. Items of that nature. Okay. So you just don't want something that just looks really bad in your house. It's just going to stick out like a sore thumb. Okay. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. So try to avoid that. So right off the bat, we've got cleaning, which is, typically big time number 1 thing. Then number 2 would be your landscaping. And then number 3, any ridiculous issues, take care of those. And then number 4, and I almost don't include this, but I will, is painting. Okay, painting can make a big difference. All right, however, this can cost money. If you have a reference, someone who will paint your house really nicely for a very reasonable price, then I would take advantage of that one, right? Maybe you can work that into your budget, okay? But painting is something that, painters are contractors. You may think, well, it's just painting, whatever. No, well, a really nice paint job can just make a massive difference in the impression that people have of your home. So if you're on maybe you can't afford to hire, a big name painter, what have you. But if you have a budget, maybe someone who has, again, someone who can have a very good reference. You don't want to mess around and get a bad paint job and, pay money, even if it's not top dollar, but get into that. But get a reference of someone who will paint your house for a very good price, do a very good job. If you have the budget for that, I definitely do that as well. So, painting. So, look, I want to tell a little story here, which is, I had this one condo that I sold. It's 2026 right now. I want to say this was around 2018, give or take. But the condo was built in the 80s, okay? So it was just a trip. When you walked into it, it was just like you're walking through a time machine into the 80s, okay? And, it had these kitchen cabinets and the bathroom vanities that just had this, original. But yet they were in super good condition, okay? It was like you walked into it, the house is just basically, everything was basically when it was built. Maybe with the exception of the flooring, there might have been some luxury vinyl plank, might have been some updated flooring, but mostly it was like walking into a time machine, the same as it was when it was built in the 80s. And so, make a long story short, 2 words, right? Well, more than 2, but pristine and super clean, okay? Pristine and clean as a whistle. That condo was pristine and clean as a whistle. And I remember we got a very good price for it, and it sold, there was good good competition. There was good interest in it. All right. We ended up getting a very good price for it. And it was dated, just massively dated. You're thinking, oh, this place is so dated. And it was, okay? But it was just so clean, so pristine, that superseded, it being dated, okay? So think about it. If you were to ask me, obviously it depends, but would I as a realtor feel better about selling, which do I feel more confident? Selling a home that's dated but pristine and clean as a whistle, or has some nice updates, but it's dirty, it's kind of grimy, it's kind of beat up a little bit, but has some nice updates, probably, it depends, obviously, but the house that's pristine and clean as a whistle may sell for more, okay, than a same house that has updates, but it's dirty, and a little beat up in some ways. Maybe the yard is overgrown. So, yeah, so being pristine and clean as a whistle, even if it's not updated, can just be a huge benefit, right? It can be really good when it comes to selling a house. So, obviously all these things, can depend, there can be certain exceptions, depending on what's going on in your house and whatnot. But these are some very good general rules I'd like you to keep in mind. Once again, number 1, cleaning. Number 2, landscaping. Number 3, no ridiculous issues. Number 4, if you get to it, painting. Okay, so clean, pristine, and clean as a whistle, right? Like if you have a limited budget, let's shoot for pristine and clean as a whistle. All right. I hope that's, helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or put in the comments and I will respond. Okay. This is Ben Fitzer, Realtor, and look forward to seeing you on other videos.